Welcome to Life Stories, where we share inspiring journeys of resilience, ambition, and triumph against the odds. Today's story is about Sarah Cooper, a woman who defied expectations and built a $100 million tech empire, all while being underestimated by her own family. From a humble garage to global success, Sarah's journey is a testament to the power of believing in yourself and creating your own path. Hit subscribe to join us. And let's dive into today's story of grit, family, and the courage to rise above. You won't want to miss it. My name is Sarah Cooper, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who love you the most can misunderstand you the most. It's a story about family, ambition, and the delicate dance of proving yourself not to others, but to yourself. Growing up in the Cooper household, success was synonymous with academic achievement. My father, a professor at Stanford, and my mother, a former educator, placed immense value on education. For them, the world was neatly divided into those with credentials and those without. And in their eyes, my older brother David embodied everything they hoped for in a child. He was the golden boy, top grades, perfect SAT scores, and a full scholarship to Stanford Business School. Then there was me. I've always seen the world differently. Numbers spoke to me, not as rigid problems to solve but as tools to create. While David thrived on memorizing textbooks and crafting the perfect resume, I was captivated by the hum of computers, the thrill of dismantling their complex circuits, and the infinite possibilities of coding. Where David pursued perfection, I chased innovation. But in a family like mine, deviation from the prescribed path wasn't celebrated. It was corrected. I remember sitting in the garage one evening, surrounded by scattered circuit boards and half-built prototypes. My mom stood in the doorway, shaking her head. "Sarah, you're wasting your potential," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. "Look at David already preparing for his MBA. And you're just tinkering." Tinkering. That word stuck with me. To them, my garage experiments were little more than a childish hobby. They couldn't see what I saw, a future where I could build something that truly mattered. Something revolutionary. But it wasn't just my parents. David, too, took every opportunity to remind me of my shortcomings. I can still picture him home for spring break, lounging in the living room with his Stanford sweater draped over his shoulders. "Well, sis," he said with a smirk, "I guess someone has to be the family disappointment. Don't worry, when I'm running a Fortune 500 company, I'll save you a spot in the mailroom." That night, I made a promise to myself, not out of spite, but out of a quiet, burning determination. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need to follow their path. I would forge my own. Dropping out of community college wasn't a decision I took lightly. It felt like stepping into a storm, knowing full well that it would come with consequences. My father, usually composed, couldn't even look at me. My mother cried for weeks, mourning what she saw as the loss of my potential. And David, he smirked, his condescension almost palpable. In their eyes, I had committed an unforgivable sin, turning my back on the world of degrees and diplomas. In those early days, the garage became my sanctuary. It was where I felt most alive, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the hum of possibility. But it was also a place of solitude, a reminder that my path had left me estranged from my family. While David posted photos of glamorous MBA networking events, I lived on ramen noodles and slept on a futon in my one-room office. The weight of their judgment was always there, lingering like a shadow. Still, I held on to my vision. I had spotted a glaring gap in the cybersecurity market. Big corporations were pouring resources into complex, expensive solutions, leaving small businesses vulnerable. These small companies were the backbone of the economy. Yet they were left defenseless against rising cyber threats. I knew I could create something better, something affordable, accessible, and powerful. The first iteration of what would become Coopertech's flagship product, Security Shield, was rudimentary at best. It was buggy, lacked polish, and came together through sheer willpower. But it worked. And in that small success, I found a glimmer of hope. Word spread. First to a handful of small businesses, then to dozens more. By the end of my third year, we signed our first $1 million contract. The money didn't matter as much as what it symbolized, proof that my work had value. Even if my family refused to see it. I wish I could tell you that moment changed everything between us. That my family finally recognized what I was building. But the truth is, their disapproval evolved in subtle, insidious ways. When I came home for Thanksgiving that year, my success was acknowledged in passing. Like an amusing anecdote. "Cute little business you've got there, Sarah," David remarked, slicing into his turkey. "But you really should consider getting a proper education. You can't build a real company without the right credentials." Mom nodded eagerly, as if he had spoken some universal truth. "It's not too late to go back to school, honey. David could help you apply to Stanford." I wanted to scream, to tell them how hard I was working, how much I had sacrificed. But what good would it have done? I had learned by then that arguing with them was futile. Instead, I smiled and focused on my plate. Let them think what they wanted. I didn't need their approval. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The truth was more complicated. Beneath my outward confidence, their words still hurt. Not because I wanted their validation, but because they were my family. No matter how much I achieved, their inability or refusal to see my worth stung in ways I didn't fully understand. It wasn't just about their dismissal of my work, it was about the growing chasm between us. The sense that I was losing something fundamental, something irreplaceable. In moments of doubt, I clung to my promise, the one I had made in that garage years ago. I didn't need to prove them wrong. I needed to prove myself right. As I worked late into the nights, perfecting our products and building a team of like-minded individuals, I began to see glimpses of a future that went beyond my wildest dreams. Coopertech was growing, not just in revenue but in purpose. We were helping small businesses stay afloat, protecting livelihoods and dreams. But the distance with my family persisted. They were proud of David. And rightfully so. He was climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious consulting firm, making partner by 35. Every family gathering became a stage for his accomplishments. David just closed a $15 million deal. David's been featured in Business Weekly. David's living the dream at Stanford. My achievements, when they were mentioned, always came with a qualifier. Sarah's company is doing well. Considering I was a dropout. Considering I had no formal training. Considering I wasn't David. And yet, I pushed forward. For me. For my team. And for the countless small businesses that relied on us. Because deep down, I knew that success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving to yourself that you were right all along. As I reflect on those early years, I see now that they were about more than building a business. They were about finding my voice, my resilience, and my worth, something no credential or degree could ever measure. What I didn't realize then was that this journey would also lay the groundwork for a reckoning. One that would force my family to see me in a way they never had before. But that's a story for another day. For now, all you need to know is that this wasn't just about creating a company. It was about creating a life. One I could be proud of even if I had to do it alone. When I look back at those first few years after leaving community college, the only word that comes to mind is grit. Every single day was a battle. While David climbed the polished corporate ladder, flaunting photos from luxury retreats and networking events, I was buried in the unglamorous trenches of startup life. My office was a cramped garage that reeked of coffee, soldering fumes, and desperation. My team was just me, a whiteboard scribbled with half-baked ideas, and an aging laptop on the brink of collapse. The vision I had wasn't glamorous, but it was clear. I had noticed something others hadn't: small businesses, mom-and-pop shops, local cafes, small-scale manufacturers were becoming prime targets for cyberattacks. Yet they had no affordable means of defending themselves. The big players in cybersecurity were focused on complex, expensive systems designed for corporate giants, leaving small businesses to fend for themselves. I saw an opportunity, one that felt both thrilling and terrifying. If I could build a solution that was affordable, effective, and simple enough for anyone to use, I could carve out a niche in the market. It wasn't just a business idea, it was a chance to make a tangible difference. But ideas are easy. Execution? That's where the pain begins. The first iteration of Security Shield, the software that would eventually put CooperTech Solutions on the map, was laughably basic. I cobbled it together through months of sleepless nights, debugging sessions that left me cross-eyed, and more cups of instant coffee than I care to admit. It was rough around the edges, sometimes more duct tape than innovation, but it worked. Barely. I'll never forget the day I landed my first client. It was a small accounting firm run by a husband and wife duo, barely scraping by after a ransomware attack had wiped out months of work. They didn't have thousands of dollars to spend on an enterprise-grade system, but they needed protection. I installed Security Shield for them personally, walking them through every feature, and when I saw the relief on their faces, I knew I was onto something. Word spread slowly but surely. One small business became 10, then 20, and by the end of my third year, we signed our first $1 million contract. That milestone should have felt like validation, a signal that I was on the right path, and in some ways, it was. But success came with its own challenges, especially when it came to my family. When I told them about the $1 million deal, their reactions were a mixed bag of lukewarm congratulations and thinly veiled skepticism. Mom, always the pragmatist, asked, "That's great, honey. But don't you think it's time to get a real business education now?" Dad offered a polite nod, but his attention quickly shifted back to David, who had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal at his consulting firm. And David, he barely hid his disdain. "Cute little business you've got there," he said over Thanksgiving dinner that year. "But you should really think about getting some proper credentials. You know, to build something real." The comment stung more than I cared to admit, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled and focused on my turkey. Let them think what they wanted. After all, I wasn't building CooperTech for their approval. I was building it for the small businesses that depended on me, for the people who needed someone to fight for them in a world stacked against them. Still, their dismissal hurt. It wasn't about the money or the success. It was about being seen, being understood. Every condescending comment from David, every well-meaning but misguided suggestion from Mom, felt like a reminder that no matter how much I achieved, I would never measure up in their eyes. I was always Sarah, the dropout. Sarah, the tinkerer. Sarah, who's doing well enough, considering. But here's the thing about pain: it can break you, or it can fuel you. I chose the latter. Their doubts became the fire that kept me going during the hardest nights. When I faced impossible deadlines, when I had to stretch every dollar to keep the lights on, when I felt like giving up, I'd hear David's voice in my head: "You can't build a real company without the right credentials." And I'd push harder. By year 5, CooperTech Solutions was no longer just a scrappy startup. We had a team of 20, a sleek new office space, and a growing reputation in the cybersecurity industry. We weren't just protecting small businesses anymore, we were attracting the attention of major players. Companies that once dismissed us as a small-time operation were now reaching out, asking for partnerships, collaborations, and even acquisitions. I wish I could say my family's perception of me changed as CooperTech grew, but it didn't. David's successes continued to dominate family gatherings. David just got promoted to CEO of the tech division. Mom would gush. David's been featured in Forbes. My achievements, on the other hand, were always acknowledged with a faint undercurrent of surprise. As though they couldn't quite believe someone like me, someone without a degree or a pedigree, could succeed. But their doubts no longer defined me. I had found something far more important, a sense of purpose. Coopertech wasn't just a company. It was a mission. A reflection of everything I believed in: innovation, resilience, and the power of thinking differently. And no amount of skepticism could take that away from me. Still, there were moments of sadness. Quiet nights when I'd look at old family photos and wonder if the distance between us could ever be bridged. I missed the closeness we once had, the way we used to cheer for each other's victories. But every time I thought about reaching out, I'd remember David's smirk, Mom's headshakes, and Dad's polite indifference. And I'd bury the longing deep inside. Because as much as I wanted their approval, I had learned an important truth: some journeys are meant to be walked alone. And that's okay. Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't about proving others wrong. They're about proving to yourself that you were right all along. But as Coopertech continued to grow, I couldn't shake the feeling that a confrontation was inevitable. I didn't know when or how, but one day, they would have no choice but to see me for who I really was. And when that day came, I'd be ready. The Thanksgiving dinner that year was supposed to be a celebration. But for me, it became yet another exercise in biting my tongue. My family had gathered at my parents' home in Palo Alto, where the walls were adorned with photos of David's achievements, his graduation portraits, awards, and magazine features. My contributions, they were relegated to casual mentions, overshadowed by the narrative of my brother's unassailable brilliance. I arrived a little late. As always, work had kept me at the office longer than I'd planned. Coopertech was in the middle of negotiations with a major client, and every detail of the contract mattered. Walking into the house, I felt the familiar wave of tension that always accompanied family gatherings. My mom greeted me with a warm but faintly disapproving look. "Oh, Sarah," she said, glancing at my simple outfit. "You couldn't have dressed up a little? This is a special night for David. You know, David's promotion to CEO of his firm's tech division was the evening's centerpiece." The table was meticulously set, and the conversation revolved around his latest accomplishments. David closed a $15 million deal last month, Mom announced proudly as she ladled cranberry sauce onto my plate. "Can you believe it? He's only 35 and already a CEO." I forced a polite smile and took a sip of wine, bracing myself for the inevitable. It didn't take long. David leaned back in his chair, his signature smirk firmly in place. "So, Sarah," he began, cutting into his turkey, "how's your little business doing these days?" The words stung, but I refused to let it show. "Coopertech is doing well. Thanks for asking," I replied evenly. "We've expanded into new markets and just signed a contract with a Fortune 500 company." Mom's eyebrows lifted slightly, but before she could respond, David chimed in again. "That's great, sis," he said, his tone oozing condescension. "But you really should think about going back to school. You've done okay so far. But let's be honest, you can't scale a company like Coopertech without the right credentials. Imagine what you could achieve with a real MBA." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I looked at my father, hoping for some sign of support. But he was silent, his focus on his plate. Mom nodded eagerly, chiming in with her usual refrain. "David's right. Honey, it's not too late to get a proper education. David could even help you apply to Stanford." My hands clenched under the table. I wanted to shout, to list every milestone Coopertech had achieved, to remind them that my company was protecting businesses across the country. But what would be the point? No matter what I said, they wouldn't see me. To them, I was still the dropout, the tinkerer, the family disappointment. Instead, I swallowed my frustration and forced a smile. "Thanks for the advice," I said lightly. But I think I'll stick with what's working. David laughed. A low, dismissive chuckle that made my blood boil. Suit yourself, he said. Just don't be surprised when the competition leaves you behind. This industry isn't kind to amateurs. I excused myself shortly after, retreating to the guest room under the guise of taking a phone call. But there was no call. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, fighting the urge to cry. Their words echoed in my head, each one a reminder of the gulf between us. How could they not see how hard I was working, how much I had sacrificed? But as the wave of emotion subsided, something else emerged: resolve. I thought about my clients, the small business owners who trusted me to keep their livelihoods safe. I thought about my team, who shared my vision and worked tirelessly to bring it to life. And I thought about myself, the young woman who had dared to step off the beaten path, who had faced every obstacle with grit and determination. I didn't need their approval. I had built something real, something that mattered. And no amount of dismissive comments or condescending smirks could take that away from me. That night, as I lay awake in the guest bed, I made another promise to myself: the next time my family questioned my worth, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would show them exactly what I was capable of. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Less than a year later, David's firm announced a major initiative to expand into the small business cybersecurity market, my market. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. But then I saw the press release. It was a direct challenge, with David's name front and center. And the language they used, it was all too familiar. Expanding into an underserved market to bring real, professional leadership to the cybersecurity needs of small businesses. The implication was clear. David had positioned himself as the solution to a problem I had already solved, casting my work as amateurish in the process. It wasn't just a professional affront, it was personal. For the first time, I felt a flicker of anger. Not the simmering frustration I'd carried for years, but a deep, burning fire. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It was about protecting what I had built. About showing my family and the world that I wasn't just some scrappy dropout playing at business. I was Sarah Cooper, the founder and CEO of Cooper Tech Solutions. And I was here to stay. What came next would change everything. Not just for my company, but for my family. They wanted to see what I was capable of. Fine. I'd show them. And when I was done, they'd never underestimate me again. And so, the journey came full circle. What started as a quiet rebellion in a garage became a $100 million empire. Built with resilience, vision, and the kind of determination that thrives in the face of doubt. My family, they've begun to see me differently now. Though the wounds of the past may never fully heal. David left the tech world, shifting to real estate, a humbler path that suited him better after our confrontation. My parents, once so enamored with traditional success, now speak of Cooper Tech with pride, even if they don't fully understand it. And me, I've found peace not just in the success of my company, but in the confidence that I followed my own path, on my own terms. Life isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. But sometimes, it's nice to do both. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt underestimated, remember, your journey is yours to define. And don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales of resilience, ambition, and the power of believing in yourself. See you in the next video.